Good afternoon, Scott Baker.
Good afternoon, Mikey. Wednesday, August 20th. Man, we have really plowed through the summer like crazy. Time for a lead better discussion of the day's field note. And we have kind of an edgy title about leaders and mobs. Leaders who refuse to submit to the mob.
Yes.
A lot of people didn't want us to do this discussion. A lot of them. There was we were getting pummeled with instant direct messages and text messages and phone calls. But we decided, no, we're going to go ahead and have the conversation.
Yes. It's interesting. You and I probably have more experience identifying mobs than a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But in the last 15 years, we as an American society, because of the internet, have really seen mobs come and go.
Yes, right.
So, and I think that it's probably a pretty good example, even though I'm not bringing it up for the reason that most people bring it up. But the most recent example has been an online mob forming around the Coldplay couple, right?
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Because, and it's really interesting the way that mobs form, right? And it's almost always when there is a value that we kind of all agree we're on the correct side of, and they're on the wrong side of it.
Yeah.
And then, yes, it's always they. Maybe the earliest example of this happening on Twitter was her name, Justine Sacco.
Is she the one that got on an airplane and
Yes.
by the time she landed, her entire career had been destroyed?
Took a nap on the plane. Well, she didn't have Wi-Fi on the plane at the time, but we had already went through 3 iterations of the way that the mob reacts by the time she got off the plane, and all of a sudden she's fired, new career, new everything.
For whatever she said on Twitter at the time.
Right. Which was making a bad joke. She was making a bad joke. And I remember the joke. I won't say it here because even out of context, it's like this
and
weird
if that,
bad
by the
joke.
way, if that had happened now, not only would the 3 iterations have happened, there would have been full AI video animations and recuts and music mixes and everything, and aerial dynamics of where she'd be coming out of the airport. It would have been wild at that point.
Yeah. The fact that we can.
They might have had to land the plane.
The mob
before they got.
The mob now has the ability to create videos in real time to be able to troll the person that we all agree. And sure enough, this couple, the Coldplay couple, has been you can't even do a kiss cam anymore without someone reenacting the Coldplay couple, right?
At all.
Yeah, and so it's going to be hard to live down. So the mob is there and it's ready and it's all the time, and it usually forms because. There's the impression that a value has been violated that we are all on the right side of and you're on the wrong side of. So
but you've identified the heart of this field note, the hard part, which actually isn't elevated so much in the field note because it comes late in the field note, and it's around just this issue of, well, how do you identify a mob? Because, and we're going to go through sort of the characteristics of leaders and the sort of 3 things you have to be thoughtful about and not kind of just, capitulating to a mob. But you also have to decide, wait, is this a mob or is this legitimate protest over something that actually needs to be discussed?
Right.
Because if you're just saying, I don't listen to the mob, but you're not listening to something that is legitimate dissent, how do you distinguish? Because that's going to be where this field note really comes down to it, which is there are people that are saying, you're saying mob, I don't see it that way.
Yes. And these days, there's an impression to make 3 or 4 dissenters online appear as if they're a mob, but they're not really a mob. Right. So you need to really be careful with understanding.
Because you even have influencers who are quick. They actually want to portray themselves as victims of a mob, and maybe 2 people attacked them. It's like, oh, it's been awful. It's been tremendous. It's and then they highlight a quote or a tweet or whatever. So in this, the field note actually goes to the leader's defense against the mob in a sort of 3-legged stool, given that you've already accepted that definition. So let's go through those. But then I think the heart of it is the part after all of that, which is distinguishing between them. So in this, when you say first line, it goes to the thing you just said, the clarifying of values, so that the leader should be looking at what are the institutional values, the values of the enterprise. It's not just the leader being like, I don't like these people. Right. So that you're saying, Here's what we're about. Here's what we stand for, right? So that becomes a certain characteristic that you have to filter through. The second one is data, right? So that if you have facts, figures, things that sort of put the thing in context, and those, people will say, well, we don't agree on the facts of the data. Fine, but let's get them out there. And the third line is, what are the reputational risks of the decision? So if you as a leader are saying, look, I feel like I'm under fire, I'm going to say I feel like this is a mob coming after our company, an initiative, a new project that a plant we wanted to build. What are the values of the company? What data do I have to kind of support those values? And then let me look at what all the reputational risk factors involved with a very long view of that. Now, is that a pretty good summary from your view?
I think so. It might feel a little bit. It's a good summary of the field note, but those three gates that you mentioned there are ones that, like, I'm imagining Amazon dealing with unionization, and them calling any version of unionization a mob forming, right? The more that they would try to characterize an attempt at unionization forming as a mob, the further and further away they're going to actually get from those people.
Yeah. Well, you might even look at like Air Canada this week with the flight attendants who walk out, and whether I can't remember, so apologize if I get some detail. I think there was maybe it was a court order about, and they were like, we're going to violate, we're not going to capitulate. I can't imagine this being a Canadian, because Canadian sort of values are fairly collaborative. And that's almost a meme itself, right? But would a Canadian business leader be like, this flight attendant union, this is a mob that's bringing the country to its knees? Right. If the frame of how you use these words is very powerful.
Yeah, and it could actually, in that particular case, it could make the strike go on longer.
Yeah, right.
Because you're characterizing these people who want to be thought of as victims as the villains, right? And we're not the villains, and now we have to prove that we're not the villains, and so this is going to go on longer and longer. But it is interesting to think of like what a mob is and what a mob is not. Like when I personally am seeing stuff like the Coldplay and Justine Sacco, like
the piling on
is wanting to be able to make a better joke, because memes emerge with the idea of like, there's a joke and now my version, my take on the joke. Like, I always want to participate in memes.
Sure.
But when memes
are would that have been like the company, whatever it was called, hiring Gwyneth Paltrow to do the video? Was that like a try to be funnier back to the situation?
I think that was probably a good approach to that, to be like, we understand that we're the brunt of the joke.
Yeah.
And just letting people know that kind of takes the air out of that balloon.
Yeah, right.
In a way. But it doesn't address the value. Like, this is written from the idea of like, if you're a leader, how should you approach the mob? And most of the time there's mobs that are happening that really don't have anything to do with your business. And I think our initial approach would be like, take a better approach than just participating in the meme, right? I'm challenged when I see, and I think it's because I read the stuff around because I delighted in Justine Sacco getting fired. Because I remember not being prepared for the idea of what it was. And I remember knowing that she was in the air, and knowing when she landed that and just everybody else on Twitter was just anticipating what she was going to tweet next when she finally woke up from her nap, right? We were all imagining this. And it wasn't until, I think it was, who's the writer with the big hair?
Malcolm Gladwell?
Malcolm Gladwell wrote about this, that I was like, oh, yeah, I approach that like a thoughtless person, right? And so now every time an online mob starts to form, my thought is, how do I actually have a healthy take on this? Not because I'm necessarily trying to help the Coldplay couple, right? But because I want to be able to help the people that are around me have a healthy take on it.
Yeah.
That I want to approach it that way, a little bit differently. And so I am talking about values. I actually do go through those three things, but it's different. I'm not going through those three lines of defense for the purpose of like actually changing mob opinion. I'm just changing like my family's opinion on it, right?
Yeah, right.
Maybe my team at work who's making fun, just kind of throwing in some things in there. It's like, maybe it's not worth just.
Let's think about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just looked, by the way, that was 2013, 12 years ago. Right.
Wow.
So now in the field note, let me go through what is identified as the ways to identify or recognize a mob. You may disagree with these. And I'm saying this to Mikey or to you who are listening or watching. And so think carefully about these characteristics. The field note says you can always recognize a mob by an unwillingness to consider any other opinion. So it's like it's my way or the highway.
Yep.
A willingness to breach social norms to get its way.
Right.
The high emotional intensity of the arguments, and a fixation on a triggering event that justifies its extreme demand. So there's 4 characteristics listed here.
Yeah.
Your thoughts on those 4?
Well, you take it back to history of like what we actually think of a mob, and maybe it's you're getting a picture of the Beauty and the Beast kind of mob, right? Because that's might be our earliest fairy tale that kind of deals with mob mentality, right? There's a literal mob. And then we want to dehumanize whoever it is and the only way to satisfy is if we actually get our hands and enact some kind of violence on the person who is deserving of our vengeance, right?
Yes,
and
right.
So,
which would be like a mimetic sort of scapegoat thing, whether it's Frankenstein or whoever. We're going to find the other, and drive them out, and do whatever to them to make them the focal point of our anger, vengeance, whatever it is.
So I do wonder if the story of the woman taken in adultery with Jesus is the earliest kind of story where there is an effort to show how to diffuse a mob, right? Where Jesus does some specific things where we might be able to pull some behavioral references out of that and be like, oh, he recognized like these 4 mimetic things that took place, and like let me actually turn the tables on all of you and say, if you don't have any guilt around these things, you go ahead and throw the stone first.
I'm not sure how well that works on X right now. I'll try it. I'll go out there. If somebody attacks me, I'll be like, hey, everybody, I think you should all examine your own hearts and consciences. Let me get back to you, Mikey, on that. But let me go real quickly, because I know we only have a couple of minutes, because you set this up with a really important point. So one of the things that is true, and I think this really weighs down on leaders, it actually weighs down on parents, is that we not only are living in a time of sort of just a hyper acceleration of options. Time is very different. Lots of philosophers, Hartmut Rosma and others, have written about this. And so, but you have, particularly in some of the literature and the people that analyze even global events, because you have, and you don't have, nobody has to comment or take sides, but when the Ukraine-Russia conflict first came to the fore, it not only affected nation states, but there were corporations that were then, because there was all of a sudden this swarm of opinion that was hitting Instagram feeds and all over social media. And so companies, whether that incident or other recent sort of conflagrations, had to make statements. We heard last week in one of our firm meetings from the very top executive of a major sports organization talking about how that organization responded during racial conflicts and what statements they made. And different companies have seen different outcomes. But the point is, there used to be a time frame where if nation states were in conflict, you might have a lot of diplomacy that would go on over a very careful and thought out period of time. And sometimes it would take years before there'd be an actual war, right? And so you would also have the same thing happening even as corporate competitors would be maneuvering. Well, now we have what some people call a networked swarm, right? You almost have this sort of, it almost takes on, there's an old term like an egregore. There's sort of like a spirit that emerges that says, you must respond to this, whether you're a corporate leader. And all of a sudden, now that sometimes these things could be good. Sometimes they could, in theory, you could get to the edge of a nuclear war because of what happened because of Instagram feeds.
Right.
It's not crazy to contemplate. The question now is leaders actually have to be ready, corporate communication teams and parents, even with their own kids. You're having to make decisions faster about the pressure. Hey, everybody's going to this party. Can I go? Well, that's been a thing parents have had to deal with, but now it's actually accelerated, right? So you have to find a way, I think, to even use some of the without even having to say this is a mob, to say, all right, let me think about the values. Let me think about the data. Let me get an actual lay of the land of what's going on here. And then let's look at the risk factors involved. And then buy yourself a beat of time. Because I think that's the biggest thing right now, which is sometimes we want to make very quick decisions. But a lot of times you want to be, and sometimes corporations have to respond. But sometimes you want to just be able to say, let's get a little bit of separation so we can be thoughtful about this and that we know that we're acting in accordance with those values and that data and that assessment of the reputational risk to the organization, the family, yourself, whatever that is.
Right. So I'll be more confrontational about it. Like if you're going to make a comment or make a public profession about your stance on the trans bathroom ban, kind of topic, you need to be ready that from there on out, if the values seem to match whatever this issue,
you're going to have to respond to every other one,
every single one of them. So the natural fallback position is to be like, as a corporate stance, we're going to choose not to say anything about anything ever, right? Then when something becomes super obvious that you should be on board because there's a clear evil and there's going to be just as much of a push for you to be like kind of shake your stance on the fact that no, we don't comment on it, right? And so to always release a statement that says our values are X, Y, and Z, and we're talking about those values all the time, however they might apply to world events, we're not going to comment on these are our values. If that's the kind of statement that you can release every time something bubbles up in the news, fantastic, more power to you. But it is hard. It is hard, right? Is it the easiest way to just go ahead and not say anything about anything as your principle? No, it's probably not the easiest thing to do because you're constantly going to have to be telling people why it is that that's your position.
Well, the good thing is, and what I really want us all to think about here at the end is how courageous Mikey and I were to really reject the calls for us not to tackle this topic on Lead Better. And yet we took it on forthrightly. I think, with
one of the mob even broke through. Our producer Andrew broke through and infiltrated our studio.
It was a little scary. Yeah. So, but we've made it through, and
we were able
I think we can rest easy tonight.
We kept him off camera, so no one knows what Andrew looks like. Like that was a tough battle. Like we were doing that without it. So you're welcome, everybody. You're welcome for never having seen Andrew's face. You're welcome.
All right. Now, I'd love to tell you what we're going to talk about on Thursday, but don't know yet.
Yeah.
We don't have the topic yet. So plan to join us.
Well, if we don't have a topic, we'll just dive deeper into Scott's teenage magician career a little deeper, which is what everyone wants to know about anyway. Right? We could spend the whole 15 minutes. I kind of hope that the topic doesn't come. I mean, we could just talk about that for 15 minutes. Maybe.
Let's not do that.
Okay.